Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Carlo Prusa MMA. Today, I am joined with top mixed martial arts prospect. He is the 4-0 undefeated Mr. Lucas Rosa, getting ready, going into battle against Matt Denning on Saturday. Battle in the Bear 15. Lucas, my friend, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Just came back from training a couple hours ago, so I just got to eat a little, and I'm excited about the upcoming week. A lot to do, and I can feel the excitement starting to build.
What's the mindset right now, knowing that, hey, you're going to be fighting in about 5 days here?
Yeah, I mean, the mindset is always like, I think now is sort of that point where you start to go, and for me at least, I go into a little bit of like kill mode. I'd say like always there's those moments like of doubt, like 2 weeks out from the fight and stuff. And like especially the more I look at a lot of films, so like the more I look at film, the more I get very like meticulous about like what the opponent's paths to victory are and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of like stress in a way. I guess stress myself out in a way, but I think at this point is when it starts to turn where like, within a couple of days I'll start to feel like invincible and feel like I could beat anybody on the planet, and I know in my heart I can. So yeah.
Obviously, fighting runs in your family. Your brother, Mr. Charles Rosa, guy
Yeah.
done big things in the UFC. Most recently was victorious game bred bare knuckle MMA.
Oh yeah,
But
that's great.
how did you find suit in this? How did you want to maybe in a way go in your brother's footsteps, follow his path? Why did you want to get into combat sports?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess you're right. It does kind of start with like my family in a way. I come from a very tough like Irish Italian family in New England, and so we kind of just grew up tough. Tough. I have like two older brothers, Dominic and Vincent, who unfortunately passed, but I had them as my oldest brothers, and then Charles, and I had a twin brother as well, and my sister Teresa, and we're very like tight knit family, and I because I had so many older brothers, I had to learn to grow up tough a little bit, and I would wrestle around with my twin brother too, Francis, all on the trampoline and stuff, and so that's kind of how it started. But from there, I ended up becoming a state champion wrestler. I did like self defense jiu-jitsu when I was really little, and uh, and I eventually like turned that into doing like rugby and that sort of thing. I was a first 3-year captain in my college in rugby, which isn't like a combat sport, but a tough sport. And so one of the things that was different about like me and my twin and the rest of our family is like we were very academic. Like I was a philosophy major, philosophy and creative writing double major. I was the only person or the youngest person from my school in Phi Beta Kappa academic honor society. Like they only gave it to like one junior, and I was it. I was like, head of all these things. I was head of the uh, newspaper and stuff at my college and my high school. And so I was really more of an academic than anything else. So when I would tell my professors like, hey, I want to be a fighter, they would kind of be like, you want to fight in a cage for a living, and some of them like would understand it, some of my philosophy professors, Professor Partridge and stuff. And they sort of like led me towards something called a Watson Fellowship. And the Watson is an academic grant that they give out to 40 people in the country every year. It's like totally an academic thing. And my project got selected out of thousands and thousands of applicants. I was one of 40 people in the entire country to get this very, very rare academic grant. And mine was on looking at mixed martial arts from a more philosophical perspective abroad. So as far as I'm aware, it's the only academic grant that's ever been given for an MMA based project. So like I mean, right there, I think like that's in a way I try to brand myself as an intellectual fighter in a way, and I think that was like really my first major step towards that because I think a lot of people saw inconsistencies with who I was as like a someone who had that dream to be a fighter one day, and my intellectual side. But to me, they were always very consistent with each other. Like MMA to me is their pursuit of knowledge as much as anything else. And so I got to travel around like as part of the fellowship, you have to stay out of the country for a year completely on your own. And so you get like 2 weeks of visitation. So my brother Charles visited me while I was in like Thailand at one point. But I was in Cambodia studying this ancient martial art called Bokatau, Thailand studying like Muay Thai, and then the Netherlands studying Dutch kickboxing. And so I had this crazy journey for a full over a year, had to do a crazy presentation in front of a ton of academics when I got back. And it was very successful. And then from there, I just knew like after being on my own for a year and like really like studying martial arts and training with them and knowing I had that skill set from wrestling for the grappling part, I was like, this is really, I know it's always in my heart, like what I wanted to do. Like when I was young, when someone would get me out in dodgeball, I don't know why I had this mentality of like, that kid has no idea. He just like got out a future like UFC champion in a way. Like I don't know why I had that in my head, but it just always was there. And so after the Watson, I came back and was like, I gotta go to the Mecca of MMA in South Florida, and that's why I packed all my stuff up from Boston and moved down to South Florida, and lived like 5 minutes away from my brother, and got really great training from Charles McCarthy. His professor, one of his best teammates, and like is one of my coaches as well. Matt Waggy is a really good wrestling coach, and so that's kind of how that developed from like my childhood to then getting that really getting into martial arts as a wrestler, and then that academic grant was obviously a huge sort of catapult of my own stem. So like Charles for sure has like given me inspiration, because I don't think I would have looked at it as like as much of a realistic option if he wasn't, on that path while I was in college. But I think like we definitely do it for a little bit of different reasons. I think I bring a little bit of a different perspective on martial arts and mixed martial arts in general.
I think where a lot of people go wrong, they look at, younger regional fighters like you, they'll see the 4-5-0 record, but I think they do not look at the amateur record. And I think it's
Yeah.
interesting. You look at your record, you have over 10 amateur contests.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was a little bit of time there before we went and turned pro. What was some of the reasons to hold out maybe a little bit before you took that next step?
Yeah, so I don't know like how much topology like has accounted for, but yeah, I had like I think like 17 wins as an amateur, and I had like four titles. And I mean, I think part of that is just like I know how valuable experience is. For me, when I go in the cage, I know the things I learn about what really works in a fight and versus what doesn't. Like you gang, I'd say like 2 to 3 months of like real hard training just from being in that cage for like 2 or 3 minutes, even if the fight's only that long, which some of mine have only been. But yeah, I mean, I've and honestly, like the last four amateur fights that I had last year, from May to I think the end of the year, those were like really kind of key moments of like, I faced some tough challenges, some kid from Honduras who was like really good. I remember I had a really tough fight against him. I went to Alabama and faced the number one prospect from Alabama and Louisiana for the title in Birmingham, Alabama. So that was like a real challenge for me. Like, I'm like, this is how I want to cap off my amateur career. So for me, it's always been about experience and like, learning. Because I think the worst thing to do would be, to have this goal that you've built up for like, over 2 decades, and then try to rush into the pro just because you want to say, oh, I'm a pro athlete. So you show up to your you know high school 10-year reunion saying, oh, I'm a pro athlete. But I think doing it the way that I did it was a little bit better, and more experience. And I think I try to kind of follow the blueprint that like Charles McCarthy and Waggy kind of laid out for me. And I see the ways things they did right, which was take a lot of amateur fights, and I try to just improve on it, like little tweaks, and that's what we're trying to do.
Obviously the professional career has been going pretty well for you so far. I mean, not even a whole year competing. You're about to have your fifth professional contest in. These fights are not lasting more than 2 minutes in the first round. I mean, you're having great success. You're doing a really good job of showing how well-rounded of a fighter you are. Obviously, you have some skills with the hands, but that wrestling, that grappling background is really showing. You're able to get your opponents down, and you're able to put on great finishes, great chokes. How important for you is just staying as well-rounded as you are?
Yeah, I mean, I think like being able to be confident no matter where the fight's at is really key, because I think one of the main things, like people ask me, are you scared before you're going to fight? And of course the answer is like, everyone, I think anyone's lying if they say they're not scared. But one of the things that eases me a lot is knowing I've done the preparation. Um, and part of that is like knowing that no matter where the fight goes, I've done the preparation for that aspect of the game. And I do look at mixed martial arts as you need to be as well rounded as possible. You need the grappling, you need the takedowns, you need the cage control, you need the striking. And so I train meticulously in a lot of that, and I've been picking things up a little bit. I have a great team in American Combat Gym, but I've been improving my striking a lot with like world class Sensei Roger Kral as well at MMA Science, and he helped build Amanda Nunes up, and that's she's the best ever for women. So he has a whole system down, and I've been really working with that a lot as well. And so yeah, I'm very confident in all that, and I think it has been kind of just a surreal. Like I guess it's been 7 months since my first pro fight was in May, in mid May. I remember initially it was slated for February. And I had a couple things canceled, and so I tried to set something else up myself in March. And I remember I then tore my MCL, and I just remember like it was already like late March, and I had a injury, and I was kind of like I just I thought to myself, and I had talked a little bit about it with my coach Charles McCarthy, and I sort of just made this commitment to myself. I'm like, you're gonna get to at least 4-0, really 5-0 by the end of the year. And I don't know how you're going to do it, like, but you need to do this. And like, it was sort of a commitment, a debt that I made to myself, and I pay my debts. So that's kind of how I looked at it. And I'm like, no matter what you're gonna do, like, so I started, I think, to get a lot more different skills in terms of like talking to promoters and networking and that sort of thing as well, which are skills that are kind of outside of my comfort zone. If it was just up to me, I would just like think about solely training and like not have to think about the other aspects of the game. But it's more than just the martial arts sometimes as well. So like that's something I think that I've picked up on a little bit in the past couple months, and it's been really beneficial. Some of these fights have my team obviously does an awesome job, and they try to put me in the best position to succeed. But sometimes you have to make things happen yourself, and so some of these fights I've had to talk to promoters personally, and I think that's set up like 3 of my 5 fights that way. So I know I'm kind of pushing things along. Someone says I'm trying to like speed run this whole thing, but I know where I want to get to, and I know like the level I have to be at, and I think to get to that level, I have to do the same thing I did as an amateur, which is gaining a lot of experience, and that comes only through the real tests, which is the fights. So
Every August, the UFC does something called the Dana White Contender Series.
yep.
4-0, could be 5-0 after next weekend. Is
Yeah.
that the goal? Is that on your mind?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I want to be able to compete with the top people in the world. Um, I think that's like the moment I feel like I cannot be a world champion is the moment that I'll stop doing MMA. And so to me, I want to be a world champion, and that's really my goal with this. And so to do that, I think you have to be at the promotions that have the top fighters, and that's obviously UFC right now. So I mean, I met Dana White before. Actually, I was at my cousin's wedding, and it wasn't even for a fight thing. I was just like, I think, staying at the Boston Encore with my brother for a night before we went up to the wedding, and we literally happened to run into Dana White. He looked at Charles and was like, "Whoa, what are you doing here?" He recognized him, and then like I think I look pretty similar to him, so he's kind of like doing double takes with both of us. And then I got to meet him and shake his hand, and he was like, "Hey, yeah, like string a couple more, maybe we'll get you on Contender." And so that's kind of like that definitely left something in my mind, and I think I was 2-0 at that point. So hopefully he'll see I'm making my mark here. And yeah, I think that's also something like I don't know if that's ever been done necessarily, but like I think by the time it's all said and done, it'll be 5 pro wins in 7 month span, which I don't know if that's like that's been done in maybe in other countries or something, but I don't know. Like I haven't heard of anyone in America doing that. So it's something I'm really I'm working towards it, and I know I have improvements to make, but I'm consider myself to be a world class fighter, and when the time comes, I'll be ready. So.
You just mentioned your brother Charles. So I got to ask you, do you get more nervous watching Charles fight, or do you get more nervous before your fights?
Yeah, I mean, so it's weird. Like, people would always ask me that, and I would kind of give half-hearted answers. But like, I know the definitive answer now because I had it happen. We both fought on the same card at Foxwoods Casino, like the biggest resort casino in the country, in North America, actually, the entire continent. We both had the privilege of fighting. It was my third pro fight, and he was fighting for a title, and we both won in really spectacular fashion in the first round. And so I would say honestly, it was his fight. Like I mean, I'm nervous in my fight, but there's a certain sense of like I feel every emotion. People say when I walk out, I look very angry. I look a lot different than, I try to be a polite kid, and I feel like when I walk out, though, I look like a maniac. Like it's almost like a split personality kind of thing. That's part of, I think, why I get the moniker King of Monsters. Um, but I think when I'm about to fight, I get this rush of all these different emotions, like, and it kind of translates as, as rage looking, but it's like, it's sort of wanting to not be apathetic to life. It's like, feeling the pride of everyone around you, feeling like the excitement of everyone around you. So it's like a mix of emotions. But with my brother, it's almost like just nerves. I'm like, man, like I just want him to succeed. Like, it's so bad. And, I'm trying to just like, do anything I can, keep your chin down, like any call that I can make that could slightly impact things. And yeah, I remember I won my fight and I had to go straight back to the locker room, and it was kind of like, I mean, like I would say I was more nervous for his. I don't know how to explain that, but yeah, I
You
think
know,
it's you don't feel as in control of it, I guess, is part of it. So.
to answer your question from a couple seconds ago, talking about not knowing if anyone else has done 5 wins in 7 months. There's a
Yeah.
guy named John Jones that actually turned pro,
Oh yeah.
won his first fight in the UFC, 7 fights altogether, 4 months.
Oh wow, yeah. Okay, yeah. So
So
John
you're on the
Jones.
right path. You're,
Yeah, I mean,
you're
I mean
at,
that's if you're comparing me, putting me in the same sentence as John Jones in any capacity. I mean, that's like he's the best ever. So.
Absolutely. Staying active like this, being as active as you are, 5 fights, 7 months stand, does that kind of make it hard to fall out of the groove? Do you just continue to carry that momentum?
I mean, it is tough because like sometimes I think for people it can be tough to like be in like knowledge, like skill building mode basically, while also trying to be in fight camps. Like fight camps, you have to kind of like settle things down, like especially towards the last week, and then like 3 weeks out you're kind of more like game planning for that specific opponent. So it can be really hard to skill build at the same time as like doing the fight camps. So like that's kind of been a little bit of a juggling act. But I think like my coaches and like I think honestly, what my solution ended up being is that I just had to train more. Like I have to get those sessions in where I'm game planning, and I also get to get the sessions in where I'm skill building. And so, like I said, I go to MMA Science a little bit more as well now. I do, but I still do the same amount of American Combat Gym ones, and also mix in the strength training and like some specialized training with my coach McCarthy for jiu-jitsu and Waggy with wrestling, and even I have a coach Billy Patton who helps me with like boxing and stuff. So I just figured out that I have to like fit it all in, I guess. And I don't know, that's obviously not the way to do it like the last 2 weeks where you have to settle down, but that's kind of how I've been doing things. I've just been training like three times, sometimes 4 times a day. And it's a lot like I say fight camps are, you asked me earlier like how I felt at this point, like it's almost feels like a light at the end of the tunnel, because like fight camps can sometimes feel so lonely, like you're like I don't socialize with people. I'm just like straight out like to the gym, back to the gym, back, eat, sleep, train, repeat. Like people think it's just like a funny saying. It's like literally my life. And so I feel like I go from like, that to literally everyone I've ever known, contacting me and like, wishing me luck and stuff. And sometimes if it's a close fight, like showing up to the fight. And so you go from like nothing to everything, like more than you could, like you never really assemble these people that you've known in your life for anything other than like maybe a wedding. But in a way, like fights have a weird way of like bringing people together, like from my life that otherwise would never be there. I see like college friends, I see aunts and uncles, I see like past friends who I've like grown out of touch with and now reconnected because of the fighting. So it's really cool to see all that stuff happen.
So many people watch this sport in this day and age. The sport has evolved. 20, 25 years ago, people were calling this human cockfighting. It wasn't legal at many places. People thought it was like criminal activity and barbaric and all this kind of crazy stuff. With that comes attention. You have the casual fans who, they look at the McGregors, the GSPs, the Habibs, and they're like, wow, it must be amazing to be a professional fighter. Like, this is the best life ever. Little do they know, man, getting there to that pedigree might be one of the toughest things you can do. Battling it on the regional scene. Obviously, you're not making millions of dollars fighting yet. There's a lot of training that goes into it that costs money. You have to sacrifice financially. A lot of guys have the 9 to 5 jobs. Some guys have kids. Some guys have a wife. You have to make these sacrifices every single day. You've been doing this for a few years now. What's made you keep pushing through the different sacrifices associated with this dream?
No, I mean, I just know, like, what I want to accomplish, I guess. And so at the end of it, like, I know, like, sometimes it's like people like, oh man, like you've done like everything you can do. And I'm like, well, not yet, like not everything, not yet, so uh and I know this, and that's one of the things I take into me with the fights is, it's it's uh it's those sacrifices that I've made. Like that's kind of one of the reasons, like, you see me come out like looking like a maniac and angry when I do my walkouts. It's like, uh, I have to make those sacrifices worth it, and so that's sort of what part of, I think about with my opponent is there, not that those sacrifices will ever be worth nothing, but to me, like, they're trying to take my sacrifices and make them like worth nothing. And so that really gets me like revved up before the fights. But yeah, in terms of like just how difficult and tough it is in the scene to kind of become an MMA fighter, like, I think one thing people overlook, even just the sport of MMA, if you're thinking about it, like martial arts has been around for like millennium. You know what I mean? It's like, even if you think about like just fighting, it's like could be eons, like fighting has been around a very long time, and it's been in every culture. Like, it's in every culture has their own sort forms of like battle arts, whether it traces back like to all these different cultures, to hundreds and like thousands of years. And so I feel like to be the best in a sport of that magnitude, that has, everyone is so hyper aware of, like, you can't ask anybody and they wouldn't know what fighting is. Like, fighting is part of humanity, and so it's one of those things where, like, yeah, it would be something to say you're the best badminton player, but to say you're one of the best fighters ever, like ever, at a point where all the martial arts have finally mixed together in these past 2 decades, like, you're the best at something that has been around for a millennium, like, at this crucial point in history. And so I think to say you're the best at MMA to me is like way more impressive than to say you're the best at like some other sport in a way. Just because of like the magnitude of it and like how many cultures are aware of it. Like, you have to be one of the top percentile of people like ever, and yeah, I think, that's one of the things that have always attracted me to MMA as well. Is, to me it imbues all the virtues that I found really meaningful, and kind of some of the same virtues that I found meaningful in, like, philosophy and some of the other pursuits that I've seeked out.
In this day and age, there's tons of fighters. There's all these different promotions: the UFC, PFL, bare knuckles, one. Very few fighters refer to themselves as a mixed martial artist in this day and age. You
Yeah.
refer to yourself as a mixed martial artist. What does it mean to call yourself a mixed martial artist?
Well, I think like the same kind of creativity and like fecundity kind of that comes with being an artist in something else also applies to mixed martial artists. Like, it's a different sort of skill set. You need like courage and, mental toughness, which I don't know if that's as present in other like art forms, but for me it's like, the creativity, the heart that you need. It's a real factor. And to me, a mixed martial artist for me is to be a seeker of knowledge, but to do it in a more physical way rather than like an abstract way. I mean, in philosophy I studied like metaphysics, which was basically like the study of concepts and things like time and death and meaning and what that meant. And it sort of deconstructs a lot of those like higher questions. But for me, like, MMA was always kind of a physical version of that, because you never stop learning. There's like, there's grappling, there's takedowns, you know, uh, there's striking, and all those elements of MMA have tons of different forms from all these different cultures. Whether you're looking at Taekwondo, boxing, uh, Dutch kickboxing, Muay Thai, you look at all these different martial arts. They have all these different lineages, and it's only within the past 20 years that you've seen them all meld together. And it sort of, I think, came from us trying to figure out which one the best was, and instead it created this like beautiful thing. And so to be in martial arts for me is kind of to like be that seeker of knowledge in a way. And I think it is a little different than like a martial artist in a way is a little different than a fighter, but I think a fighter, I imbue both of those terms in a way, I think.
In this day and age, something that we see very heavily in mixed martial arts is personality. It's entertainment. You have guys who are now, they're putting on facades. They're putting on a character because they know it's going to make them money. It's going to get them a title fight. How, in your opinion, how has mixed martial arts been impacted by personality and entertainment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. In some ways, I see like the benefit of I think part of the reason why I think people like sorts of it is kind of like the same as looking at these fighters in a video game. If there's something really distinct about you, like, and you're like, oh man, who would win? Like, like a lumberjack from Vermont, or like a SoFlo boy, like so it's that kind of a like I think I sometimes get like caught up in that. I'm like, oh man, like I don't know who will win this kind of like the stylistic matchups is really what makes MMA so, unique and beautiful, and the fact you can win in so many different ways. Um, and I think that's really one of the best aspects of it. But I do think sometimes people take the facades a little far. I think like some of the clickbaity stuff can, I don't know, to me, like as someone who's worked in journalism, I just kind of like see through it a lot. So I think I'm like, oh man, this is so like base and subtle. But I guess it gets some of the MMA market. So yeah, I'm like a little indifferent to some parts of it. But I mean, I think for me, the thing that's always been great about MMA is it allowed me a platform to be like my most authentic self. And I think, like, because when people see me in that ring, they almost don't recognize me like the same way. But I'm like, you don't understand. That's like the same as like seeing, you know, an artist's painting. Like, you may not recognize what it is, but that's like, almost the mask coming off in a sense. So I think like uh, in some ways those might be acts, but in some ways I think they're like, to some people, maybe an authentic part of themselves they wouldn't get to, actually reveal if they were just going an office job, typing on the desk all day. So, um, like, are they facades? I don't actually know that they're as much as facades as people make them out to be. Like, I think in some way, if that's how you want to represent yourself to the world, there's got to be some reason for it in a way. And I know like money is a big motivator, but I think uh, I think to be a fighter, it's you're not always motivated by money, because you could be doing a lot of other things if you wanted to make money. So,
All right, let's get to the fights. You're taking on Matt Denning this weekend. Overall, what do you think of him as an opponent?
oh, I mean, super super experienced, super tough. He has 8 pro wins, which is double what I have. So, it's like and I've seen the way he wins fights too. He's finishes fights too. So, I have a lot of respect for that. But at the end of the day, he's an obstacle to what I'm trying to achieve, and he's an obstacle. I look at things one fight in a time. There's a piece of paper taped to my ceiling that says 5-0, and it's been there for too long. So, every day I wake up and look at that, and I think my opponent and what I'm gonna have to do to him. So, uh, I'm very prepared for this, and I'm prepared for this moment, and I know the game plan going in, and this kid's he's impressive. He's a really good grappler, has some explosive punches, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be a level above, and he'll see that.
At this stage in the career, do you think it's important to fight guys like this with experience?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think like you just got to keep trying to level up, level up, level up, and I fought. I think it was my third fight, the one at Foxwoods. I fought somebody who had 2 pro wins, and he ended up, after fighting me, he like fought somebody else who like, you know, uh, I think he shattered their orbital in a bare knuckle fight right after that. So like, you go in and everyone's like, "Man, you destroyed that guy. That was nothing. You would never lose." But then I'm like, "Man, these guys I'm going against, there's a reason I call myself King of Monsters, or people call me King of Monsters, because I'm literally fighting like monsters. Like, other people don't understand this. These people would be the best people in in their province, like, if you pick them out in like their town, like they're the toughest guys from their town for sure, and so people don't always understand that when they see like pro fighters and like with how fast I've been finishing these people, but these people are high level guys, and this is like a real step up because this guy has a lot of pro wins. He has tons of experience. He's been around fighting some of the best guys in New England for a while. He just fought Nostos guys who are really, really high level as well, from Devin Powell's gym in Maine. And so, I know the challenge that I have in front of me, and but at the end of the day, that's what it's about. If you want to be a champion, you have to be willing to end up fighting the best guys in the world, and that starts with steps. But this is the next step up. He's a high level guy.
For you, what's the ultimate goal? What do you want to accomplish with the MMA career?
I mean, I think I want to kind of change a little bit of the way that people like, look at martial arts. Um, I think like, it's fallen a little bit away from that like idea of like, an intellectual pursuit. Not that it has to be like for everyone, but I think, interjecting a little bit of that would get I think people understanding a little bit more the meaning within it, the how it can bring meaning to people's lives, like the authenticity of it, and then even bring other parts of the markets in that people don't like. I think there are definitely untapped markets. I think there's like a very like you know standard way of looking at like what an MMA fan looks like, and I think it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Like, and I think that's the case, especially with a lot of the academics I've talked to. I think. You could definitely get a bigger market if you understood you know how other parts of the population think about like fighting, or at least change their views on it, because I know I've been able to do that with some people, like after they've met me or whether they've like read my blogs or coming to my fights. And it's I think that's been a really important thing. And on top of that, I want to promote like a clean like lifestyle. My parents run a charity called Chucky's Fight that helps prevent substance abuse in the New England area, and it's very dear to us because I lost two older brothers to substance abuse. My dad helps a lot of people in that area. My parents do. People come up to me when I'm in New England and say like, your parents literally saved my life. They're like a second mother and father to them, and half the time I don't necessarily always know who they are. So they've affected a lot of people, but they're really good role models, and I try to also be a good role model. I think the most surreal part of any of this, whether it's the fighting or even going in the cage, it's not as surreal as when like a kid comes up to me and asks for like an autograph or something. That's like to me the most special thing, and to be able to motivate and inspire other people is big. But in terms of actual goals, I'm trying to be the champion of the world, and I'm trying to do it in the top promotion. So I'd say right now that's the UFC, and there's other top promotions I know that are competing and stuff. But so ultimately, I want to be the best.
Both you and your brother, you've had your share of adversity that you've had to face in your life. Obviously, you touched upon the substance abuse stuff. I
Yeah.
asked Charles a question after the Barrett fight. In that second round, he's getting tagged up a little bit. But, in those times, do you think of what you've been through, of what you've come through to overcome it? When you're facing the lows during training, when the sparring rounds get tough, if you're in the future in any tough situations, do you think having that adversity that you've battled through, is that going to show strength and help you get through anything?
Yeah, I mean that's everything, and that's like sort of what I think I try to emulate, is that you can have these tragic events like affect you, but they don't necessarily have to define you, or they you can use what you've gone through in your life, and you know make a positive spin out of it. And that's what I try to do every day, and that's what I've tried to take away from MMA most of all, is you can take those tragedies and use them to sort of rage against the, because there was times, I think for me, one of the things was like those tragic events, they make you want to not be vulnerable to life. They make you want to not like invest in other people, invest in other pursuits. And I think it's really important that you do are vulnerable to life, and invest your full heart and soul into the things you care about, whether that's people, whether that's pursuits. And so for me, it's always, I think MMA has been kind of that key to open up myself to life, and yeah, to be my most authentic self. So I hope it can be for other people, and I hope that through my fighting I can inspire other people to do that as well. But yeah, that's something I take with me into every fight. I write 17 and 18 on my hands before I fight, because that was my older brother's hockey numbers. And so, like, those sorts of things, those tragedies that have happened in my life, I try to use those as sort of a fire, before I go into the fights.
All right, last question for you, Lucas. In a perfect world, what is the outcome when you take on Matt Denning this Saturday?
It's going to be violent, and it'll be a first round finish. That's ideally what's going to happen. And I train very hard to make that happen, and we'll see how it works out. I know I respect the guy, so it's not like I'm gonna have to fish for things that like, I'm not trying to fish for anything like ridiculous or fancy. I'm trying to go in there and be vicious, and what that looks like, I'm not quite sure yet. You kind of got to feel things out in the fight, but uh, I know that my goal from the beginning of the bell will be to finish that before before the next bell.
Well, Lucas, man, thank you so much for your time tonight. Look forward to watching you fight on Saturday, and I think you have an amazing thing going, man. And just can't wait to keep covering you and watch you get bigger and bigger in this.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It was awesome to meet you in Biloxi, and I'm excited for this fight in Vermont. So I'm excited. Yeah, I'm super excited to get my 5th pro win up in Barre.
Awesome. Well, that's it for us tonight. That is the King of Monsters. He is Mr. Lucas Rosa. I'm the Fight Dr. Carlo Prusa. Stick around, fight fans.